Before we dive into this epic story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you captivating stories and content that ignite your imagination and keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. In a small, sleepy town nestled in the heart of the countryside, there existed a sinister urban legend known as Charlie Charlie. The legend told of a malevolent spirit named Charlie who could be summoned using a simple yet eerie game. The game required 2 pencils and a piece of paper, on which the words, yes, and no, were written. By arranging the pencils in a cross and asking questions, players could supposedly communicate with Charlie, who would answer by moving the pencils. Many believed the legend to be nothing more than a harmless prank, a spooky tale to tell around campfires. However, there were those who whispered of darker encounters, of players who had summoned something far more malevolent than they had anticipated. These stories were often dismissed as mere fabrications, but for a group of friends, the legend would soon become all too real. It was a crisp autumn evening when the dare was issued. The town's annual Halloween festival had just concluded, and a group of friends, Jake, Emily, Sarah, and Mark, had gathered at Jake's house for a sleepover. The friends were in high spirits, sharing stories and candy as they lounged in the dimly lit living room. "Come on, let's do something spooky," Sarah suggested, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "It's Halloween, after all." Jake grinned mischievously. "How about we play the Charlie Charlie game? I've heard some pretty creepy stories about it." Emily rolled her eyes. "Oh please, it's just a silly game. There's no such thing as ghosts or spirits." "Are you scared, Emily?" Mark teased, a smirk playing on his lips. "Maybe we should play and see what happens." Despite her skepticism, Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She didn't believe in the supernatural, but the idea of summoning a spirit was unsettling. However, she didn't want to seem like a coward in front of her friends. "Fine," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Let's play." The friends gathered around the coffee table, and Jake fetched a piece of paper and 2 pencils. He quickly scrawled yes and no in the corners of the paper and placed the pencils in a cross formation, balancing one on top of the other. "Okay, here goes nothing," Jake said, his voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. "Charlie Charlie, are you there?" For a moment, nothing happened. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, waiting in tense silence. Then, slowly, the top pencil began to move, rotating until it pointed to yes. Emily gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. That has to be a trick. Someone must have breathed on it or something." "Let's ask another question," Mark suggested, his eyes fixed on the pencils. "Charlie Charlie, are you a good spirit?" The pencil remained still for a moment before slowly moving to no. A chill settled over the room, and the friends felt a growing sense of unease. "This is getting creepy," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe we should stop." But Jake, driven by a mix of curiosity and bravado, pressed on. "Charlie Charlie, what do you want?" The pencil didn't move for several long seconds. Just as the friends began to relax, it suddenly shot to no, then to yes, and then back to no, again, as if it couldn't decide. A sudden, inexplicable cold draft swept through the room, causing the candles to flicker and the hairs on the back of their necks to stand on end. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their unease growing with each passing moment. "Jake, I think we should stop," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't fun anymore." But before Jake could respond, the pencil moved one last time, pointing to yes, with an almost violent jerk. The unsettling experience with the Charlie Charlie game left the friends rattled, but they tried to shake it off as they continued their Halloween festivities. They watched horror movies, told ghost stories, and indulged in candy, attempting to recapture the light-hearted mood of the evening. As the night wore on, they finally decided to call it a night. Emily, Sarah, and Mark settled into sleeping bags on the living room floor, while Jake retreated to his bedroom upstairs. The house fell silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant howl of the wind outside. Emily lay awake, unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. She glanced at the piece of paper and pencil still lying on the coffee table, the memory of the game's final answer lingering in her mind. She told herself it was just a silly game, but the sense of dread refused to dissipate. Just as she began to drift off to sleep, a faint sound reached her ears. It was a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, coming from somewhere in the room. Emily's eyes snapped open, and she strained to hear. "Charlie. Charlie." She sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah stirred and rubbed her eyes. "Hear what?" "That whisper," it said, "Charlie, Charlie." Mark groaned and turned over. "You're just spooking yourself out, Emily. Go back to sleep." Emily wanted to believe him, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. She lay back down, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, and tried to convince herself it was all in her head. Hours passed, and the house remained eerily quiet. Just as Emily was about to fall asleep again, she heard the whisper once more, this time closer and more distinct. "Charlie. Charlie." Emily's breath caught in her throat, and she felt a cold, clammy hand brush against her arm. She stifled a scream and bolted upright, her eyes scanning the room frantically. She saw nothing out of the ordinary, but the sensation lingered, leaving her shaken. Desperate for reassurance, Emily nudged Sarah awake. "Sarah, please. I heard it again. Something's not right." Sarah sighed and sat up, her expression a mix of annoyance and concern. "Emily, it's probably just the wind or your imagination. Let's just go back to sleep, okay?" Emily nodded reluctantly, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She lay back down, her body tense and her mind racing. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, Emily finally drifted off into a fitful sleep. Her dreams were filled with dark, shadowy figures and the haunting whispers of Charlie, Charlie. The next morning, the friends tried to brush off the events of the previous night as they gathered in the kitchen for breakfast. However, the uneasy atmosphere lingered, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Did anyone else have weird dreams last night?" Emily asked, her voice hesitant. Jake nodded. "Yeah, I kept dreaming about those pencils moving by themselves. It was pretty creepy." Sarah and Mark exchanged uneasy glances. "I had some strange dreams too," Sarah admitted. "But it's probably just because of the game. Our minds are playing tricks on us." Mark tried to lighten the mood. "Let's just forget about it and enjoy the rest of the weekend. We still have plenty of candy left." The friends agreed, but as the day wore on, strange occurrences continued to plague them. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, the temperature fluctuated inexplicably, and shadows seemed to move in the corners of their vision. That evening, they decided to head into town to attend a local haunted house attraction, hoping a change of scenery would lift their spirits. The haunted house was a popular Halloween destination, known for its elaborate scares and detailed sets. As they made their way through the dark, winding corridors of the haunted house, Emily's unease grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them, lurking just out of sight. At one point, they entered a room designed to look like an abandoned nursery, complete with creepy dolls and flickering lights. As they walked through, Emily felt a sudden, intense coldness wash over her. She turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing red. "Do you see that?" she whispered urgently to the others. Jake squinted in the direction she was pointing but saw nothing unusual. "See what?" "The figure in the corner, it's watching us," Emily insisted, her voice trembling. Sarah and Mark exchanged worried glances. "Emily, there's nothing there. It's just part of the attraction," Mark said gently. But Emily was convinced that the figure was real. As they continued through the haunted house, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the red eyes burning in her mind. That night, back at Jake's house, the friends gathered in the living room once more. The atmosphere was tense, and the shadows seemed to cling to the corners of the room. "I think we need to do something about this," Emily said, her voice firm. "That game, it wasn't just a silly prank. We summoned something, and it's following us." Jake sighed. "Emily, we've been over this. It's just our imaginations running wild. There's no such thing as spirits or curses." But Sarah and Mark seemed less certain. "Maybe we should look up some information about the game," Sarah suggested. "There might be something we're missing." The friends spent the next few hours searching the internet for information about the Charlie game. They scoured forums, watched videos, and read numerous articles, hoping to find some answers. What they discovered only deepened their unease. They learned that the game had origins rooted in ancient folklore and superstitions. Some sources claimed that Charlie was the spirit of a young boy who had met a tragic end, while others suggested that it was a malevolent entity that preyed on those who dared to summon it. There were countless stories of people who had played the game and experienced terrifying consequences, hauntings, possessions, and even disappearances. Emily found a particularly chilling account on a paranormal forum. A user described playing the Charlie game with friends and summoning a spirit that wreaked havoc on their lives. The user claimed that they had been plagued by nightmares, strange noises, and shadowy figures ever since. The only way to stop the torment, they said, was to properly close the game by saying goodbye to Charlie. "Guys, I think we need to close the game," Emily said, her voice urgent. "We didn't say goodbye to Charlie. That's why this is happening." Jake frowned. "You really believe that? It's just a game." "Maybe, but what if it's not?" Mark said, his voice tinged with fear. "It won't hurt to try." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Let's do it. We have nothing to lose." With a sense of determination, the friends gathered around the coffee table once more. They set up the pencils and paper just as they had the previous night. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and the shadows seemed to press in closer. Jake took a deep breath and spoke the words with a shaky voice. Charlie, can we say goodbye?" The pencil remained still for several long moments. The friends held their breath, waiting for a sign. Then, slowly, the pencil began to move, pointing to yes. "Okay, now let's say goodbye," Emily urged. Charlie, goodbye," they said in unison. The pencil didn't move. The room remained eerily silent, and the sense of unease lingered. Emily felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. "Did it work?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a sudden, bone-chilling scream echoed through the house. The friends jumped, their hearts racing. The scream was followed by a series of loud bangs and crashing noises from upstairs. "What was that?" Mark exclaimed, his eyes wide with fear. "It came from Jake's room," Emily said, her voice trembling. "We need to check it out." With their hearts pounding and adrenaline coursing through their veins, the friends cautiously made their way upstairs to Jake's room. The hallway was dark and foreboding, the air thick with an oppressive sense of dread. As they reached the door to Jake's room, they noticed that it was slightly ajar. A cold draft emanated from within, and the room was shrouded in darkness. Jake hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open, revealing the chaos inside. Jake's room was in disarray. Furniture was overturned, books and belongings were scattered across the floor, and the window was wide open, letting in the cold night air. The friends stared in shock, unable to comprehend what had happened. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, his voice shaking. "Who did this?" Emily's eyes were drawn to the center of the room, where a shadowy figure stood motionless. Its eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and an aura of malevolence radiated from it. The figure seemed to be watching them, its presence sending chills down their spines. do you see that? Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Yeah, I see it, Mark replied, his face pale. What is it? The figure took a step forward, and the friends instinctively backed away. The air grew colder, and a low, menacing growl filled the room. We need to get out of here, Sarah said urgently. Now. Without hesitation, they turned and ran down the hallway, their footsteps echoing through the house. As they reached the stairs, the growl intensified, and the shadowy figure seemed to be closing in on them. Jake stumbled, nearly losing his balance, but Emily grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. They reached the living room and slammed the door behind them, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. We need to call someone, Sarah said, her voice shaking. We can't handle this on our own. Who are we supposed to call? Jake asked, his voice tinged with desperation. The police won't believe us. They'll think we're crazy. Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a solution. Then she remembered something she had read earlier. There's a paranormal investigator in town. I saw his name on one of the forums. Maybe he can help. Do you have his contact information? Mark asked, his voice urgent. Yeah, I saved it on my phone, Emily replied, pulling out her phone and scrolling through her contacts. Here it is. His name is Professor Alden. Without wasting any time, Emily dialed the number. After a few rings, a deep, reassuring voice answered. Professor Alden speaking. Professor Alden, my name is Emily. My friends and I need your help. We played the Charlie game, and now something is following us. We don't know what to do. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. I'll be there as soon as I can. Stay together and stay calm. Help is on the way. It wasn't long before Professor Alden arrived at Jake's house. He was a tall, distinguished man with graying hair and an air of quiet authority. He carried a black leather bag filled with various tools and instruments for investigating the paranormal. Thank you for coming, Professor, Emily said, her voice filled with relief. It's my duty to help those in need, Professor Alden replied, his voice calm and reassuring. Now, tell me exactly what happened. The friends recounted their experience with the Charlie game, the strange occurrences that had followed, and the terrifying encounter with the shadowy figure in Jake's room. Professor Alden listened intently, occasionally nodding as he took notes. It sounds like you've summoned a malevolent entity, Professor Alden said finally. The Charlie game is not just a harmless prank. It's a gateway, a way to communicate with spirits, both benign and malevolent. Unfortunately, it seems you have attracted the attention of something dark. Is there anything we can do to stop it? Jake asked, his voice filled with desperation. There are steps we can take to banish the entity and close the gateway, Professor Alden replied. But it won't be easy. We'll need to perform a cleansing ritual to drive the spirit away and protect this house from further intrusion. The friends exchanged nervous glances but nodded in agreement. They were willing to do whatever it took to rid themselves of the malevolent presence. Professor Alden instructed the friends to gather a few items for the ritual: salt, candles, sage, and a bowl of water. He also retrieved several items from his bag, including a small bell, a vial of holy water, and a protective amulet. They gathered in the living room, where Professor Alden began to draw a circle of salt on the floor. He placed candles at each cardinal point and lit them, filling the room with a warm, flickering light. The scent of sage wafted through the air as he lit the bundle and began to smudge the room, purifying it with the sacred smoke. Everyone, take a seat inside the circle, Professor Alden instructed. This will protect us during the ritual. The friends sat down, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. Professor Alden stood at the center of the circle, holding the bell in one hand and a vial of holy water in the other. We are gathered here to banish the malevolent entity known as Charlie, Professor Alden intoned, his voice resonating with authority. By the power of light and the forces of good, we command you to leave this place and return to the void from whence you came. He rang the bell, its clear, resonant tone filling the room. He then sprinkled the holy water around the circle, reciting a series of incantations in Latin. The air seemed to thrum with energy, and the shadows in the room writhed and twisted as if in agony. As Professor Alden continued the ritual, the candle's flames burned brighter, casting a warm, golden glow. The oppressive presence that had filled the room began to wane, and the sense of dread lifted. Finally, Professor Alden held up the protective amulet and spoke the final words of the incantation. By the power vested in me, I banish you, Charlie. You are no longer welcome here. Begone. A sudden gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The air grew still, and the room fell silent. The friends held their breath, waiting for any sign that the ritual had worked. The oppressive presence that had plagued them was gone, and the house felt lighter, almost peaceful. The friends exchanged relieved glances, grateful that the ordeal seemed to be over. Is it gone? Sarah asked, her voice hopeful. Professor Alden nodded. The ritual appears to have been successful. The malevolent entity has been banished, and the gateway closed. However, I must caution you all to remain vigilant. The supernatural is unpredictable, and it is always wise to take precautions. The friends breathed a collective sigh of relief, their tense expressions softening. They felt a sense of liberation from the oppressive presence that had haunted them for the past few days. Thank you, Professor, Emily said, her voice filled with gratitude. We couldn't have done this without your help. You are welcome, Professor Alden replied, packing up his tools and instruments. I advise you to cleanse your home regularly and avoid dabbling in such dangerous games in the future. The friends nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Professor Alden gave them a reassuring smile before taking his leave, promising to check in on them periodically. With the house now free from malevolent spirits, the friends decided to spend the rest of the evening together, comforting one another and reflecting on the ordeal they had just endured. They shared their thoughts and fears, finding solace in each other's company. In the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to normal for the friends. The strange occurrences ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere that had once filled Jake's house was gone. However, the experience had left a lasting impact on all of them. Emily found herself more attuned to the spiritual and paranormal, taking an interest in studying protective rituals and cleansing practices. She sought guidance from Professor Alden, who became both a mentor and a friend. Under his tutelage, Emily learned to harness her newfound sensitivity to the supernatural and use it for good. Jake, Sarah, and Mark also took precautions to protect themselves from any future encounters with the paranormal. They each carried protective amulets and performed regular cleansing rituals in their homes. The experience had taught them the importance of respecting the unknown and the dangers of meddling with forces beyond their comprehension. Despite the harrowing ordeal, the friends' bond grew stronger. They supported one another through their fears and uncertainties, finding comfort in their shared experiences. Their friendship had been tested and emerged even more resilient. Months passed, and the friends continued to grow and heal from their encounter with the malevolent spirit. However, a lingering fear remained in the back of their minds, a fear that the spirit might return. One evening, as they gathered at Emily's house for a movie night, they couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The wind howled outside, and the atmosphere felt heavy, as if a storm was brewing. Do you guys feel that? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's like the air is charged with something. Emily nodded, her expression serious. I feel it too. Something doesn't feel right. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a chilling breeze swept through the room. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding. Maybe we should call Professor Alden, Jake suggested, his voice tense. Emily reached for her phone, but before she could dial, a cold, menacing voice echoed through the room. Did you really think you could banish me so easily? The friends froze, their faces pale with fear. The voice was unmistakably that of the malevolent entity they had encountered months ago. "We need to perform another ritual," Emily said urgently. "But this time, we'll need to be even stronger. We can't let it win." With renewed determination, the friends quickly gathered the necessary items for the ritual: salt, candles, sage, and a bowl of water. Emily set up the circle of protection, while Jake, Sarah, and Mark lit the candles and smudged the room with sage. As they took their places inside the circle, the room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive. The malevolent presence was palpable, its anger and hatred suffocating. Emily began the incantation, her voice steady and resolute. "We are gathered here to banish the malevolent entity once and for all. By the power of light and the forces of good, we command you to leave this place and return to the void." Jake, Sarah, and Mark joined in, their voices merging with Emily's. The candles' flames burned brighter, casting a protective glow around them. The air thrummed with energy, and the malevolent entity lashed out, trying to break through the circle of protection. But the friends held firm, drawing on their bond and the strength they had gained from their previous encounter. With each word of the incantation, the entity's presence weakened, its power waning. Finally, with a final, powerful chant, the entity let out a deafening scream and disintegrated into a cloud of dark smoke. The room fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. The friends collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but triumphant. They had faced their fears and emerged victorious, banishing the malevolent entity once and for all. "We did it," Emily said, her voice filled with relief and pride. "It's really gone this time." Jake, Sarah, and Mark nodded, their expressions reflecting their sense of accomplishment. They had faced the darkness together and come out stronger on the other side. In the days that followed, the friends continued to heal from their ordeal. They found comfort in their shared experiences and supported one another through the lingering fears and uncertainties. Emily's bond with Professor Alden grew stronger, and she continued her studies in the paranormal, determined to use her knowledge to help others. Jake, Sarah, and Mark also remained vigilant, taking precautions to protect themselves and their loved ones from the supernatural. The experience had left a lasting impact on all of them, but it had also taught them valuable lessons about friendship, courage, and the importance of respecting the unknown. They knew that they were stronger together and that they could face any challenge that came their way. The story of the friends' encounter with the malevolent spirit of Charlie became a cautionary tale in their small town. It served as a reminder of the dangers of dabbling in the supernatural and the importance of respecting forces beyond their comprehension. Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Mark's bond grew even stronger, and they remained close friends, supporting one another through the ups and downs of life. They continued to share their experiences and knowledge, hoping to protect others from making the same mistakes they had made. And so, the legend of Charlie lived on, a chilling tale of caution and courage. It reminded the town's residents to be mindful of the games they played and the spirits they summoned, for the supernatural world was full of mysteries and dangers that were best left undisturbed. In the end, the friends had faced their darkest fears and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable and their spirits resilient. They had learned to navigate the shadows and embrace the light, knowing that together, they could overcome any challenge. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling tale and want more engaging stories and content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that ignite your imagination and keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.